At my baby shower, my brother stood up in front of 40 guests and announced his Stanford acceptance, right as I was about to cut the cake. I thought he was just being thoughtless and dramatic, but when I found out he'd planned it for weeks, I realized this wasn't about Stanford at all. It was about making sure I never had a moment that wasn't about him. And that's when I finally understood the game my family had been playing my entire life. The plan was perfect. I'd spent 3 months orchestrating every detail of this baby shower, and for once in my 30 years of life, everything was going exactly as I had envisioned. Soft blush pink and champagne gold decorations hung from every corner of the Riverside Community Center in Millbrook, creating the elegant but cozy atmosphere I dreamed of since I was a little girl playing with baby dolls. My name is Isabella Hartwell. Izzy to most people, and this moment represented more than just a party. After losing 2 pregnancies in the past 3 years and countless months of hoping, praying, and trying, this baby shower felt like a celebration of a miracle. At 20 weeks pregnant with a healthy baby girl we'd already named Sophia Rose, I was finally getting to experience what I'd watched so many other women take for granted. The community center had been transformed. Flowing fabric drapes and dusty rows cascaded from the ceiling, fairy lights twinkled like stars, and centerpieces of white peonies and eucalyptus adorned every table. My husband Ethan had surprised me by hiring a professional photographer, something we really couldn't afford, but he'd insisted. "This is our moment, he had said, while hanging the custom banner that read, "Welcome, little Sophia," in elegant bold script. "We're going to remember every second of it." The guest list was perfect, too. 38 people, carefully curated over weeks of deliberation. My college friends who'd flown in from Denver, Ethan's sister Caroline, who drove down from Portland, my coworkers from the marketing firm where I'd worked for 6 years, and of course, family. My parents, Robert and Patricia Hartwell, had driven up from their home in Oakmont, beaming with pride. My grandmother, Nana June, 83 and still sharp as a tack, had insisted on bringing her famous lemon bars, despite my protest that we had enough desserts. And then there was my brother, Marcus Hartwell, 26 years old, perpetually charming, and somehow always the center of attention wherever he went. He'd arrived that morning looking typically put together in his pressed khakis and button-down shirt, carrying a beautifully wrapped gift, and wearing that smile that had been getting him out of trouble since he was 5 years old. "Congratulations, big sister," he'd said, giving me one of his signature bear hugs that always made me feel simultaneously loved and slightly overwhelmed. "This is going to be amazing. I'm so proud of you." I'd felt a flutter of warmth in my chest. Marcus and I had our complicated moments, what siblings didn't, but in recent years, we'd grown closer. He'd been genuinely supportive during more pregnancy struggles, checking in regularly, and even sending me encouraging texts during the worst of the fertility treatments. When I told him about this pregnancy at 12 weeks after we'd heard the heartbeat and felt safe enough to share, he'd actually gotten teary-eyed. The morning of the shower had unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance. Ethan and I had arrived at 10 a.m. to set up, and by 11:30, everything was picture perfect. The gift table was artfully arranged in pale pink wrapping paper and white ribbons. The dessert table showcased not only my custom 3-tier lavender and lemon cake from Sweetmore Bakery downtown, but also an array of petit fours, chocolate-covered strawberries, and those lemon bars from Nana June. I'd even splurged on a professional baby shower coordinator, a woman named Mrs. Chen, who specialized in making these events feel effortless. She'd helped organize games that actually seemed fun rather than awkwardly forced, a guess the baby food tasting that had everyone laughing, a onesie decorating station where guests could create personalized outfits for Sophia, and a memory jar where people wrote advice and well wishes for the baby. By 2 p.m., when the last guest had arrived, I felt like I was floating. Everything was going exactly according to plan. The weather had cooperated, a perfect May afternoon in Millbrook with sunshine streaming through the community center's tall windows. The photographer was capturing candid moments of laughter and joy. My pregnancy had kind to me that day, too. The morning sickness that had plagued me for months had finally subsided, and I actually felt beautiful in the flowing maxi dress Ethan had helped me pick out. "You're glowing," my friend Sarah from college kept saying, and for once, I actually believed it might be true. The gift opening had been magical. Each present felt like a small treasure. Tiny onesies with sayings like "Daddy's Girl" and "Made with Love," a handcrafted mobile from my artistic friend Maya, practical items like bottles and burp cloths that made the reality of motherhood feel excitingly tangible. My husband Ethan sat beside me, carefully collecting ribbons and bows to save in Sophia's baby book, his eyes bright with the same wonder I was feeling. Marcus had given me a beautiful gift, a silver locket engraved with Sophia's first locket and a tiny photo of the ultrasound inside. It was thoughtful and personal, and when I opened it, I actually got emotional.
"I wanted her to have something from her Uncle Marcus that she could keep forever," he'd said, and the sincerity in his voice had made me reach over and squeeze his hand. Everything was perfect, absolutely, completely perfect. The games had wound down around 3:30, and Mrs. Chen had smoothly transitioned everyone to the dessert portion of the celebration. This was the moment I'd been most looking forward to, the traditional cake cutting where the guest of honor gets to make a little speech, thank everyone for coming, and officially close out the celebration with sweetness and joy. I had been practicing my speech in my head for weeks. I wanted to thank everyone for their support during the difficult years, acknowledge how much this day meant to Ethan and me, and share how excited we were to welcome Sophia into such a loving community of family and friends. The photographer positioned herself at the perfect angle. Mrs. Chen had orchestrated the gathering beautifully, with everyone forming a natural semicircle around the dessert table. Ethan stood beside me, his hand on the small of my back in that protective, loving way he'd developed since I'd gotten pregnant. The late afternoon sunlight was streaming through the windows, creating the kind of golden glow that photographers dream of. I picked up the silver cake server, the one that had been my grandmother's and that my mother had insisted I use for this special occasion. The cake was a work of art. 3 tiers of lavender and lemon with delicate buttercream flowers cascading down the sides, topped with a tiny fondant baby shoe and the words, "Welcome, baby Sophia," in elegant script. "Okay, everyone," I said, raising my voice just enough to capture attention while maintaining the intimate, joyful tone of the afternoon. "Before we cut this beautiful cake, I just want to say a few words." The room naturally quieted, faces turning toward me with warm, expectant smiles. My mom had her phone out, ready to record. Nana June was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. She'd been emotional all afternoon, saying this reminded her of my mother's baby shower 31 years ago. Caroline was beaming at me with the kind of pure happiness that only comes from people who genuinely love you. I took a breath, feeling the weight of the moment, the gratitude, the joy, the culmination of months of planning and years of hoping. "I can't begin to tell you what this day means to Ethan and me," I began, my voice steady but full of emotion. "After everything we've been through to get here, having all of you celebrate Sophia with us feels like—" That's when Marcus cleared his throat. It wasn't a little cough or a subtle sound. It was deliberate, attention-commanding, the kind of throat clearing that says, "Excuse me, but I have something important to say." In the quiet moment I'd created for my speech, it cut through the air like a bell. I paused, cake server still poised above the beautiful lavender creation, and looked at him. He was standing near the back of the group, but somehow his presence seemed to fill the room. He had that look on his face. The one I'd seen countless times growing up, but had hoped we'd outgrown. That particular combination of excitement and confidence meant Marcus had news, and Marcus was going to share that news right now, regardless of timing or context. "Sorry, Izzy," he said, but his tone didn't sound sorry at all. It sounded like someone who was bursting with something too important to wait for another minute. The room's attention shifted. Not completely. This was still my baby shower, after all, but enough that I could feel the energy change. People turned slightly toward Marcus, curiosity replacing the focused attention that had been directed at me and my cake-cutting moment. I felt Ethan's hand tighten slightly on my back, a subtle signal of support mixed with concern. My mother, Patricia, looked confused, glancing between Marcus and me as if trying to understand what was happening. "Marcus," I said gently, trying to maintain the peaceful atmosphere while redirecting attention back to the moment we'd all gathered for, "maybe we could talk after the cake." I was just about to, but he was already reaching into his pocket, pulling out his phone with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested this wasn't spontaneous at all. This was planned. This was rehearsed. "I got into Stanford," he announced, his voice carrying clearly across the room as he held up his phone screen. "Full ride, academic scholarship. I just got the email this morning." The silence that followed lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. I stood there, frozen, cake server still in my hand, trying to process what had just happened. This was my baby shower. My moment. The celebration Ethan and I had planned for months. The joy we'd waited years to experience. The community gathering to welcome our daughter. And Marcus had just turned it into his Stanford announcement party. The explosion of reaction hit like a wave. Cheers erupted from multiple directions. My Aunt Linda actually gasped and put her hand to her heart. My father, Robert, broke into a huge grin and started moving toward Marcus with his arms outstretched. My mother immediately burst into tears, the happy kind, the proud kind, the kind she'd been saving for years, waiting for Marcus to achieve something this significant. "Oh my God, Marcus!" Caroline shrieked, abandoning her position near me to rush over and hug him. "Stanford, that's incredible! I knew it!" Nana June called out, her own tears forgotten as she clapped her hands together.
Within moments, the carefully orchestrated semicircle around my cake had dissolved into a crowd surrounding my brother. People were reaching for his phone to see the acceptance email, asking questions about his major, about when he'd applied, about his plans. The photographer, confused but professional, started snapping pictures of the congratulatory huddle. I stood there, still holding the cake server, watching my baby shower transform into Marcus's celebration in real time. The cake sat uncut, the speech unfinished, the moment I'd anticipated for months evaporating as if it had never existed. Ethan stepped closer to me, his presence warm and solid. He said quietly, his voice carefully controlled. "Are you okay?" I couldn't answer immediately because I wasn't sure. Was I okay? This was good news. Stanford was an incredible achievement. Marcus was my brother, and I loved him, and I should be happy for him. But the timing... "It's fine," I said, though my voice sounded strange to my own ears. "It's great news. Really great news." But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that had settled in my stomach like a stone. This wasn't just poor timing or social obliviousness. This felt calculated. This felt deliberate. This felt like Marcus. And that's when I realized that despite everything, despite the thoughtful gift, despite the supportive text during my pregnancy struggles, despite the tears when I'd told him about Sophia, nothing had actually changed. My brother had just hijacked my baby shower, and somehow everyone in the room thought that was perfectly normal. The cake eventually got cut, but not by me. While Marcus held court in the center of the room, fielding questions about his Stanford acceptance and graciously accepting congratulations from every single guest, Mrs. Chen quietly stepped in to manage the dessert situation. She caught my eye with a look of professional sympathy, the kind that said she'd seen family drama derail celebrations before, and smoothly took over. "Let's get everyone some cake while we celebrate all the wonderful news," she announced diplomatically, and began serving slices to guests who seemed eager to have something to do with their hands while they processed the dual celebration happening around them. I found myself standing awkwardly to the side, still in my flowing maxi dress, still technically the guest of honor, but feeling increasingly invisible as the afternoon wore on. Ethan never left my side, his jaw tight with barely controlled frustration, but he was too polite to make a scene. That was one of the things I loved about my husband. His instinct was always to protect the peace, even when the peace was being shattered around us. "This is unbelievable," he murmured under his breath, quiet enough that only I could hear. "The timing is just..." "I know," I whispered back, watching as my mother Patricia posed for photos with Marcus, her arm around his shoulders, beaming like he'd just won the Nobel Prize. I bet he's been stressed about college applications for months. Something about that comment stuck with me, though I couldn't put my finger on why. Marcus had graduated from Millbrook State University 2 years ago with a degree in business. Why would he be stressed about college applications? But before I could ask Sarah what she meant, my Aunt Linda had swept her away to discuss pregnancy cravings. The shower was supposed to end at 4:30, but by 4, people were already starting to make their exit preparations. Not leaving exactly, but gathering purses, checking phones, engaging in that subtle dance of polite party departure. Mrs. Chen had efficiently organized the gift hall into neat bags by the exit, and guests were making their way over to say goodbye and offer final congratulations. But here's what made the whole thing surreal. Everyone was congratulating both of us. Izzy, thank you for such a beautiful shower, and Marcus, congratulations on Stanford. What an exciting day for the Hartwell family, a new baby, and Stanford. You must be both so proud. It was like they genuinely couldn't see what had happened. Or maybe they could see it but didn't know how to address it, so they decided to treat it as a planned dual celebration rather than acknowledge the obvious hijacking that had occurred. My grandmother, Nana June, was one of the last to leave, and she pulled me aside while Marcus was still surrounded by well-wishers near the gift table. "Sweetheart," she said in her soft, careful voice, taking my hands in her papery ones, "this was a beautiful shower. Sophia is going to be so loved." That subtle dance of polite party departure. Mrs. Chen had efficiently organized the gift hall into neat bags by the exit, and guests were making their way over to say goodbye and offer final congratulations. But here's what made the whole thing surreal. Everyone was congratulating both of us. "Izzy, thank you for such a beautiful shower, and Marcus, congratulations on Stanford. What an exciting day for the Hartwell family, a new baby, and Stanford. You must both be so proud." It was like they genuinely couldn't see what had happened. Or maybe they could see it but didn't know how to address it, so they decided to treat it as a planned dual celebration rather than acknowledge the obvious hijacking that had occurred. My grandmother, Nana June, was one of the last to leave, and she pulled me aside while Marcus was still surrounded by well-wishers near the gift table. "Sweetheart," she said in her soft, careful voice, taking my hands in her papery ones, "this was a beautiful shower. Sophia is going to be so loved." I felt tears prick my eyes at her words, the first genuine acknowledgement I'd received all afternoon that this day was supposed to be about my baby. "Thank you, Nana. That means everything to me." She squeezed my hands and glanced over at Marcus, then back at me. For a moment, I thought she might say something about the timing, about how strange it was that he'd chosen this moment for his announcement. But instead, she just smiled sadly. "Your brother has always had a flair for the dramatic. But today was about you and little Sophia, and everyone here knows that. Don't let anything take away from how special this day was." After she left, it was just immediate family remaining: my parents, Marcus, Ethan, and me. Mrs. Chen was efficiently packing up decorations and coordinating with the community center staff about cleanup. The photographer was showing my mother some of the pictures she'd captured, though notably, most of them from the last hour featured Marcus prominently. "Well," my father, Robert, said, clapping his hands together with the hearty enthusiasm he brought to most situations, "what a day. 2 major celebrations in one afternoon. We're going to remember this forever." Marcus was glowing. There was no other word for it. He looked like someone who had just experienced the best day of his life, which I supposed he probably had. Stanford was a big deal. It was a huge deal. Under any other circumstances, I would have been genuinely thrilled for him. "I still can't believe it," he said, shaking his head with wonder. "I mean, I hoped, but Stanford? Full scholarship? It doesn't feel real." My mother, Patricia, had been quiet during the cleanup, but now she stepped forward and pulled both Marcus and me into a group hug. My 2 successful children. Marcus going to Stanford and Izzy starting her family. I couldn't be prouder. Ethan cleared his throat gently. "We should probably start loading the gifts into the SUV," he said, clearly ready to end this day and process what had happened in private. As we began the process of packing up, I found myself watching Marcus more carefully. He was helping carry gift bags, chatting easily with my parents about his plans for Stanford, discussing potential majors and housing options. He seemed completely at ease, as if nothing unusual had happened. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't embarrassment or social awkwardness or poor timing. Marcus wasn't acting like someone who had accidentally overshadowed his sister's baby shower. He wasn't apologetic or sheepish or even particularly aware that anything might be wrong. He was acting like someone who had planned this perfectly. The realization came slowly, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. The timing wasn't coincidental. The dramatic announcement wasn't spontaneous. The way he'd positioned himself in the room, the way he'd waited until the exact moment I was about to cut the cake, the way he'd pulled out his phone like he'd been rehearsing the gesture. "Marcus," I said carefully as we loaded the last of the gifts into Ethan's SUV, "when did you say you got the Stanford email?" "This morning," he replied without hesitation, "right around 10 a.m. I was so excited I could barely contain myself all day." But that didn't make sense. If he'd gotten the email at 10 a.m., why hadn't he mentioned it when he arrived at the community center? Why hadn't he told our parents immediately? Why wait until the precise moment when all eyes were on me to share news this significant? "That must have been hard," I said, testing the waters, "keeping such big news to yourself for hours." "Well, I wanted to share it with everyone at once, and the shower seemed like the perfect opportunity to have the whole family together." The perfect opportunity. Not just it just so happened to work out or the timing was coincidental. The perfect opportunity. Because Marcus was right. The shower had been the perfect opportunity. The perfect opportunity to make sure that even on my most important day, he was still the center of attention. And suddenly, I realized this pattern had been going on a lot longer than just today.
He shrugged, but there was something in his expression, a flicker of satisfaction that he tried to hide but didn't quite manage. "Well, I wanted to share it with everyone at once," he said, "and the shower seemed like the perfect opportunity to have the whole family together." The perfect opportunity, not it just happened to work out or the timing was coincidental, the perfect opportunity. As Ethan and I drove home in silence, the backseat loaded with gifts for a baby who was supposed to be the star of today's celebration, I couldn't stop thinking about that phrase. Because Marcus was right. The shower had been the perfect opportunity. The perfect opportunity to make sure that even on my most important day, he was still the center of attention. And suddenly, I realized this pattern had been going on a lot longer than just today. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.